Happy Halloween, SEC Unfiltered family. And no, your eyes do not deceive you. See, I actually am dressed up in costume, but the costume that many of you already know me as. Cole Thompson the Clown with his terrible SEC takes. And I figured today, let's go full out with Halloween. When we go out, we go trick-or-treating. And that means you either get a trick or you get a treat. And throughout the conference in 2024, there have been plenty of tricks and treats. So why don't we break down the biggest ones overall? Welcome on into SEC Unfiltered. It's Cole Thompson the Clown here. Make sure that you like the video, smash that ring notification, and hit the subscribe button because we're talking college football every single day, including Halloween, to get you caught up with everything in the greatest conference to ever exist. Download the podcast version of the show wherever you get your podcast listening systems. For those of you listening on podcast systems, I am Cole Thompson dressed up as a clown today. That's what the joke is. Make sure that also you're following us on the social channels, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, at SEC Unfiltered. If you want to follow me, it's at Mr. Cole Thompson, and check out all of our great work found at SECUnfiltered.com. This episode is brought to you by our friends over at RHOBACK. Go to RHOBACK.com and use the promo code SECU for 20% off your first purchase. Fall foliage is around the corner. You got the weather changing. You want to be dressed the nine on game days. Do so. RHOBACK.com. Polos, hoodies, joggers, shorts, pullovers, much, much more. Promo code SECU. So, when you go to the door, you say trick or treat. And that's exactly what we have this year in the SEC. Plenty of tricks and plenty of treats. How about we start off with the first trick, Auburn's preseason expectations. So going into the offseason, we all thought, well, Auburn they brought in enough transfers. They went out and they added in some really, really good recruits. And they feel like that now going into a second season with Hugh Freeze calling the offense, things would get better. Well, no, not at all. See, they're masquerading as a very bad team because of their turnover margin, mostly when it comes to the quarterback play. Peyton Thorne has basically been a Cole Thompson 2.0, and they haven't been able to find any consistency with losses to Cal, losses to Arkansas. Definitely a loss that probably should have been a win over Oklahoma, and they finally found their first victory in conference play against Kentucky. But now it feels like it's a little bit too late. Many of us thought that Auburn, with a stellar defense headlined by DJ Durkin and some new transfers, plus an overall offensive identity led by Jarquez Hunter and Cam Coleman, Rivaldo Fairweather, this would have been a team that maybe fought for the spoiler role in the SEC. 8-4, 9-3. But ultimately, we're going to probably see them either just sneak their way into a bowl game, putting pressure on Hugh Freeze to deliver in a critical third season, or they're going to be sitting at home in December wondering, why do we have clown makeup on our face? How about a treat? Texas A&M's consistency. So for years, we used to always call Texas A&M the expected team. And what do I mean by that especially? Well, you knew that they would wake up and play really well in primetime matchups. Maybe they wouldn't walk away with a win, but you would see the version and the identity of Texas A&M that truly was expected to be a part of this team for the long term. Games against LSU, games against Alabama, games against Auburn when they were ranked, games against Ole Miss when they were ranked, games against Tennessee. And then they would play down to the level of competition. They would have an anemic performance against Mississippi State. It would be too close for comfort down in the Southwest Classic. They'd walk away with the win, but they wouldn't look like a top 10 team. And then, of course, who all can forget the Appalachian State disaster that happened in 2022. Well, it's a new era in College Station, headlined by not Jimbo the Clown, but Elko the Enforcer. Mike Elko has completely revamped the Aggies offense, and especially the defensive front. They rank top 25 in almost every single metric, including third down conversions, sack rates, tackle for losses, headlined by players who are finally living up to expectations like Torian York, Nick Scorton, Shamar Stewart, Shamar Turner, Bryce Anderson. And the offense does have an identity to where they basically are a teeter-totter of success. Some days, you got to plan for Connor Wigman. On other days, you got to plan for Marcel Reed. And the ground game is potent, giving them a second punch. Texas A&M goes into this weekend with a matchup against South Carolina. If they win that game, a game where in years past you would probably say, well, a top 15 team isn't going to lose on the road, what more would you want to say about Texas A&M? Because at this point, they would have shown you that they can win against top 10 teams. They can win against inferior competition. And basically, the only thing that's hurting them from going to a college football playoff are the self-inflicting wounds, which certainly feel like a thing of the past. How about another trick? Georgia's rushing attack. What are some things that we know about Georgia underneath Kirby Smart? Well, number one, they know how to play physical defense. And they got back to that kind of 2 weeks ago when they faced off against Texas down in Austin. But the other part has been the ground game. They've always been good at developing running backs, whether it be DeAndre Swift or Nick Chubb or Keith Marshall or Herschel Walker, or you can go to multiple other players. But Trevor Etienne comes on in, and we expect him to be the bell cow back with a 1A, 1B type formation, whether it be Branson Robinson, whether it be Nate Frazier. And ultimately, we haven't gotten that just yet. Not to say that we haven't seen at least some bit of life from Trevor Etienne, 422 yards, 7 touchdowns on the ground. Nate Frazier has shown that he can be a good complementary back, but we're going into the month of November where usually we're pushing towards 800 yards, 900 yards, maybe even 1,000 yards. And the backup gets about 500 to 600 yards. Overall, we haven't gotten that. In fact, when you look at Georgia so far this season on the ground, they haven't had that secondary punch that takes pressure off of Carson Beck. Beck last year was able to really trust his passing attack because if he had the secondary element that was the ground game. So far this year, it feels like that if you don't have success on the ground, you're forcing Carson Beck to have to win through the year. And ultimately, a guy who we all thought was going to be in the race for the Heisman Trophy may just be in the race to get the number 1 seed in the SEC by the season's end. And that's largely due to the fact they have some instability on the offensive line. And more importantly, when it comes to the ground game. How about a treat? South Carolina's defense. You know, I said earlier this year and got clowned for it a lot that South Carolina was going to be a team that was probably the biggest wild card. You tell me that they find a way to beat Alabama, wouldn't be shocked. You tell me that they find a way to lose to Vanderbilt, wouldn't be shocked. You tell me that they find a way to get a top 10 win against Texas A&M, wouldn't be shocked. Well, largely it's because they have a defense that is physical. And how upsetting would it be for Gamecock Nation everywhere to realize it's kind of a year that was wasted. Tonka Hemingway, Debo Williams, Dylan Stewart, Kyle Kennard, all this talent that we've seen is not coming back in 2024. You do have Dylan Stewart back, but you will be losing other players to the NFL draft. Yet still, top 25 in every single metric. Third down conversions, sacks, tackles for losses, run defense, secondary play. In fact, the secondary has been the weakest part, and yet they still rank top 5 in conference play and top 25 in national level in turnover ratio. So overall, South Carolina's defense has been its backbone. It's a reason why they were able to go down to the wire against LSU. It's a reason why they got a win over Oklahoma, up 21-0 after 5 minutes. And it's a reason why they have a shot to play against Texas A&M and close out the year potentially at 9-3. Now, the offense has got to deliver on its end of the bargain, but overall, it's very hard-pressed to say that this is not a South Carolina roster that you don't feel confident in moving forward, especially if they're able to continue to once again bring in the right names via the transfer portal. How about a trick? Arkansas? No, just Arkansas, because of masquerading as a bad team are the Razorbacks. We have seen them at their peak. We have seen them at their highest level, and we have seen them actually deliver on Saturdays when they aren't shooting themselves in the foot. Taylon Green is a roller coaster of anxiety and heart attack field-ridden place. The ground game has been very successful with Jaquindon Jackson. You do realize that they have a good passing attack headlined by Isaac Satenga as the vertical threat and Luke Haas downfield. You also really like what you've seen so far from their defense at times, headlined by coordinator Travis Williams, who probably is going to garner a lot of interest in the offseason to go elsewhere and get a significant pay raise. Kind of like we saw last offseason with Blake Baker. But ultimately, this is a team that found a way to lose despite outgaining Oklahoma State by over 200 yards in Stillwater. This is a team that found a way to lose to Texas A&M despite outgaining the Aggies by 125 yards in Arlington. And this is a team that found a way to slow down the tempo of Tennessee's passing attack, yet had no answers to a depleted run game that was LSU. Ultimately, it just feels like a trick on watching Arkansas football because you know that they're not as bad as they look in some performances. You know what? They're better than advertised, but they're not good enough to go to a college football playoff. They're not good enough to go to an SEC title game. And ultimately, I'm not even sure they're good enough to be the spoiler on every Saturday. Ole Miss looking ahead, potentially Texas looking ahead, Missouri for a last-second hoorah as a late case to the college football playoff. They can win those games. They also can find a way to get over 200 yards of offense over the other opponent and still find a way to lose in the process. How about another treat? Diego Pavia's Commodores. So out in Nashville, it has been a promising year for the Door Nation. In fact, I would say it's been a very quality year out in Nashville, especially at First Bank Stadium. And why? Because number 2 may have a case for being the number 1 quarterback in the conference. Diego Pavia has lit up the charts and has brought a revamped version of Commodore football to First Bank Stadium. Fans everywhere are watching as Pavia Power slices and dices and makes play after play and puts his offense ahead. And more importantly, puts himself in a great conversation to lead his team to an upset. When you think spoiler, you think Vanderbilt at this point. Why? Well, they beat the number 1 team in the country in Alabama, despite being a 21-point underdog. They nearly beat Texas at home in a shootout at the very end, even when they didn't have their great first punch. And they've also been able to show that they're a win away, potentially this weekend, to go to a bowl game for the first time in nearly a decade. Clark Lee made some changes. He was not afraid to go out and swing big when it came to adding in the right pieces at offense coordinator and at quarterback, and he put trust in his unit to go call plays defensively. It is a new culture. It is a new standard. It is a brand new aura and expectation out in Nashville. And guess what? It can be sustainable. You look at where this Vanderbilt team is going, what direction they currently sit in, and what direction they could be by the season's end. It's hard not to come away impressed with the Doors and what you believe that they will be by the time that we see 2025 roll around. How about another trick? Mizzou's offense. If you told me that the starting 5 wide receivers, the number 1 tight end, your starting quarterback, and your offensive coordinator were all going to be coming back for another go around in Como, I would have said, you know what? Probably going to go 10-2. Probably going to go to the college football playoff. Okay, well, I did say that. But I also thought when you bring in 2 running backs like Nate Noel and Marcus Carroll, plus you're able to fortify your offensive line with the additions of Caden Green and Marcus Bryant, things are going to be promising. Far from it. Corey Batoon and the defense have actually been keeping Mizzou in most games. They brought it down to the wire against Vanderbilt, because Vanderbilt would have won that game if not for the defense getting a couple of key stops. They definitely did it against a team such as Texas A&M. They did it against Alabama for the first half, and let's just call a spade a spade. You don't have the weaponry to be able to find a way on defense to close out games and win at 10-4. That's just not the case. It never will be the case. Brady Cook feels like that he's off. He's now dealing with an injured ankle. It's probably going to be around for the rest of the year. You don't really see that progress that you want to from Theo Wees or for Luther Burden. Brett Norfleet is not living up to expectations, and Nate Noel is now dealing with an injury too. I really want to believe that Mizzou was going to be a different squad this year. I thought that they were going to be sustainable. Things that we saw last year would transcend into 2024, and we'd be talking about them in such a different light. But ultimately, when you look at this Mizzou squad, their offense is very pedestrian while their defense is very potent. And when you don't have the two coexisting together, it ultimately leads to the results that we have seen on Saturdays, where you'll get a close win against Auburn. And unfortunately, when you have to play against top 10 quality competition, you're shown the door and basically out of the college football playoff hunt. How about another treat? Alabama panicking. Yeah, fans everywhere who are not a part of the Crimson Tide faithful, go ahead and start opening your ears. And if you are a part of the Crimson Tide faithful, I am very sorry to do this to you. But for years, all we heard was Alabama the standard. We can't get past Nick Saban. It's Alabama and insert secondary team here because they get the best talent. They develop the most quality NFL players. They're punching out future head coaches in waiting. And they have a game plan to where even if we are A+, we're still going to lose. Well, South Carolina nearly came back and won with a B- performance. Vanderbilt came back to win with a B+ performance. They had struggles at times against Tennessee, which, by the way, did not have its best game either, yet they had more talent at the very end. And now Alabama enters its bye week and hopefully going into the matchup against LSU with a shot to potentially be undefeated, to potentially be knocked out of the college football playoff in year one of Kalen DeBoer. And so many of the fans have turned on Kalen DeBoer since the second half of that game against Georgia. That was week 4. It's almost been a month since that game has occurred. And you want to know what the sad thing is? They're going to say that he's the only one at fault. Like, you weren't going to see any bit of regression at times. You do realize that not only was Alabama ridiculed by the transfer portal, but they brought in a ton of talent that needed to coexist and gel together. And that, unfortunately, has now led to many fans saying, nope, 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 gotta fire him, not good enough. Who's coming in and fixing that right away? But if you are a fan of any of the other 15 squads in the SEC, you're salivating, realizing that the dynasty may not be over. In fact, it's still maybe right around the corner, masquerading as a very bad team right now. But at this very moment, Alabama fans are panicking. Alabama fans are wondering, what can we do to get Nick Saban back? What can we do to clone Nick Saban to then fire Kalen DeBoer out of a cannon into the sun because if he is just not the right guy to lead the team? And so if you're a fan of any other opponent, you kind of like watching Alabama squirm. And speaking of trick, Kalen DeBoer's honeymoon phase, he gets the marquee win. He gets the massive win, the substantial victory over Georgia, number 1 Georgia in its backyard. And everyone says, including yours truly, Alabama is just getting started. Alabama, they're looking like a team that is gung-ho to go to the college football playoff, and they may have replaced the head coach, but they haven't replaced the energy. You see why I'm dressed as I am today, because of that would be a very big clown take. Find a way to lose a week later out in Vanderbilt. Regardless if Vanderbilt has turned the corner, you should never lose that game. Look awful in the second half against South Carolina. Never truly find an identity on offense against Tennessee. And even though Missouri, you get a win 34-0 over, keep in mind that Drew Pine was so bad that even he couldn't find a way to miss open targets that were defensive backs. So it's not like you can sit here and say you beat a fully healthy, transparent Mizzou squad. You have to win moving forward. And by the way, fans are already sick of Kalen DeBoer. They're sick of how he acts. They're sick of how he dresses. There are literal people out here saying that because if he wore a t-shirt, that was the reason they lost to Vanderbilt. Giving zero credit to Vanderbilt's game plan, giving zero credit to the inability for Ryan Williams to come up with that big-time catch, the pick 6 that led by Jalen Milroe, the inconsistencies of the offensive line. No, instead, we're just saying, oh, no. It's Kalen DeBoer's fault for wearing a t-shirt, not looking like Bear Bryant, Gene Stallings, or Nick Saban, guys who have won the championship before. So it was a trick to think that for 1 second, Alabama fans were going to understand that Kalen DeBoer, who is a good coach, who I believe and many others believe is actually the right coach for the organization, was going to make things better. It was a trick all along. They were going to give him a grace period. Nope. The writing is on the wall that they want him shown the door and they want to bring in the next guy. Here's the question. Who is that guy? I don't know. You certainly don't either. And let's be fair. I don't think anybody really does because of how blessed you were to have Nick Saban on the sidelines. Let's talk about another trick. Nico for Heisman talk. Now, I'm going to make this abundantly clear before I go into this rant. I said that Nico Iamaleava was going to be a good quarterback. I told you all that Nico Iamaleava was going to be a big-time name for Tennessee and probably be a reason why you go to the college football playoff. But I also told you to please temper your expectations on him because if he was a redshirt freshman making his first full season as a starter where you were potentially going to have questions on the offensive line, do you want to know the reason why Tennessee only has 1 loss on the year? It's not because of Nico. It's because of their defensive front. It is because of Tim Banks' play calling. And it is because of Dylan Sampson and his ability to boot, scoot, and boogie. That is why. It has nothing to do with number 8. And that does not mean that number 8 can't eventually turn the corner and next season be in the Big Apple hoisting up the trophy that belongs to the greatest player in college football. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is I told everyone to temper their expectations. But no, he gets $8 million. You're going to see why he ends up being the highest paid quarterback in NIL. The greatest name to come on through Rocky Top since Peyton Manning. Well, he might be. But Peyton Manning had a rocky first year in the NFL before he went on to become one of the greatest sheriffs of all time. Maybe give yourself a moment to breathe when it came to Nico. It was always too far-fetched to believe a quarterback of his capacity was going to be a front runner for the Heisman in year 1. So it was always a trick. It was just one that you need to go ahead and have your eyes open to. How about a treat being competitive balance going into the month of November? Who's going to win the SEC? Well, LSU can. So can Tennessee. So can technically Ole Miss if they run the table. Texas still can technically. Texas A&M has yet to lose a game in conference play, and the only one that they lost to was against potentially a top 10 Notre Dame roster. South Carolina can spoil it for everyone. Alabama is technically not out of the woods just yet. Vanderbilt's still playing very good football. Auburn's got a couple of home games. Do you notice how the competitive nature of the SEC currently is still intact, where yes, you do have your bottom dwellers, the Mississippi States of the world. Yes, you do have your underwhelming teams, the Floridas of the world. You can potentially throw in the Arkansas, or maybe, at least for my money, the Ole Misses from our preseason expectations. Missouri certainly falls in this category. But every single Saturday, if you don't give your A game the way that we told people that were joining the conference from Texas and from Oklahoma, that you were going to be shown the door with an L and nothing left to say. And that still holds true. Arkansas beat Tennessee. Tennessee beat Alabama, who also lost to Vanderbilt, who Vanderbilt could lose to Auburn this weekend, who then could lose to Texas A&M, who then could lose to Texas, who Texas went down to the wire with Vanderbilt and ultimately lost to Georgia, who, by the way, Georgia had a near close call with Mississippi State and with a team in Kentucky that right now beat Ole Miss. The competitive nature of what we have currently in this conference is second to none, which is why my other trick is, why are people saying that the SEC is having a down year? The level of competition has been raised, not diminished. That's the difference. So many people are looking at teams like Oregon and Ohio State and Indiana and Penn State and saying, that is what competitive football looks like. Clemson, BYU, Iowa State, Miami. Put them in the SEC and let's see what their records are. Better yet, take a South Carolina or take an Oklahoma or take a Vanderbilt for that matter and put them in the ACC. What's their record? 11-1, 12-0, college football playoff bound? Take a Big Ten squad, middle of the pack. Put them in the SEC. Are they not 3-9, 4-8? Is that not an easy win for a program like potentially Mississippi State? Is that not a guaranteed victory for a team like Florida? Maybe even Auburn, for instance, over a Rutgers or over a UCLA? That's what we're dealing with. It's a trick to think that the SEC is having a down year because there's more parity than ever before. What that shows you is that it is still the conference where it just means more. More opportunities for you to get an upset, more opportunities for you to strike, and more opportunities for you to better your squad and your overall resume and route to the college football playoff. It's why when we talk about teams saying, you know what, maybe we got to let 3 in from the SEC and 4 in from the Big Ten. You're out of your mind if you actually believe it. 2 more for you. The rise of the running back. How about that for a treat? So if you haven't been paying attention this year, Dylan Sampson is right alongside Ashton Jeanty when it comes to rushing touchdowns. He's got 17. Le'Veon Moss at Texas A&M is not only averaging 6.4 yards per play, but he also has 10 scores, and Henry Parrish does too. Jaquindon Jackson is one of the more physical ground game enforcers for Arkansas, and Jarquez Hunter leads the conference at nearly 1,000 yards with 863. Not to mention, he's also averaging 7.2 yards per play, and he's getting those big explosive runs. Rocket Sanders is blasting off. Jam Miller is having a really solid season. Nate Noel is doing a good job. Demesumo Karangbe has done well. Cedric Alexander has looked good. Caleb Duran looks phenomenal as the young up-and-comer. Davin Booth has looked good. And even young quarterbacks like Diego Pavia and Taylon Green have been able to make plays with their legs. The rise of the running back in this conference is second to none. When you have that secondary punch, the way that a team like Texas A&M does, the way that a team like Ole Miss does, the way that a team like Tennessee does, and that might honestly be their first punch instead of their counter move, you have a shot to win every single Saturday. It's very easy to look on paper and say, well, how are we so sure that the SEC is good? Because that they have a great run game. And to me, that's what you look for whenever you're trying to find that team that can win the national championship. And one more treat for you, and this is one near and dear to my heart, a legacy moment appearing in the Lone Star Showdown. I'm not sure if you guys are paying attention, but right now Texas A&M is undefeated in conference play. And the only loss that Texas has on the year is against Georgia. And if A&M runs the table with wins over South Carolina, New Mexico State, Auburn, they will be 10-1 going in to the game that we love in this state for the first time since 2011. And if Texas runs the table with matchups against Florida, Kentucky, Arkansas, well, they will be undefeated in that matchup, or they will be 10-1 in that matchup for what will determine who's going to go play in Atlanta, who's going to punch their ticket to the college football playoff in a year where it's a brand new coach down in College Station and a brand new team in a conference where it just means more. And this has been a game to where you do not need to talk to any Aggie or Longhorn out there. They know what the animosity is because they've played it in other sports, basketball, baseball, softball. They've certainly done it in tennis. They've done it in every other event that ever exists. But football has been on the back burner. We haven't seen it reach its peak because of the game hasn't been played in over a decade. Since Texas A&M hightailed it out of the Big 12 and joined the conference that now Texas is a part of in their first season. And one of these teams is going to the college football playoff with a win in this game. And both of them can afford to lose a game. And I still feel like one of them gets the win. They're in the doesn't dance. But what's really fitting is if one of them gets a loss, let's just say for some reason A&M loses to South Carolina this weekend. Or in a few weeks, Florida marches on into Austin, Texas and beats Texas. Or Arkansas on the road finds to get a way to another marquee victory underneath Sam Pittman. Well, now that's a playoff elimination game. It has to be. 9-3 is not guaranteeing you a spot with all much parity in this sport. So when you tell me right now that that is not a treat for the SEC to welcome on in a rivalry that is being renewed this year in a conference to where you want these type of games to carry significant weight, top 10 versus top 10 matchups in a state that develops caliber, superstar, future NFL talent on the regular, and what this will do for recruiting, and what this will do for building a foundation going into 2025, and what this will do for bettering your odds of landing certain players in the portal, it's second to none. If you are an if you are an A&M fan, if you are a Texas fan, you're excited to know that this game is back. And if you are an SEC fan that does not truly understand what the mechanisms and what the power is of this matchup, let me make this abundantly clear. When November 30th comes rolling around, you will see why us Texans love watching the Aggies and the Longhorns do battle for 3 hours at Kyle Field or DKR. It's a treat. And honestly, for somebody that has been waiting for this rivalry to come back, it is the ultimate treat as we head into the final month of the college football season. But let me know in the comment section down below, what tricks or treats do you envision in the SEC this year? Which ones did I miss? Which ones did you like? Which ones did you hate? Like, rate, review, subscribe. Follow us on all the social channels, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter at SEC Unfiltered. If you want to follow Cole the Clown, it's at Mr. Cole Thompson on Twitter. And check out all of our great work found at SECUnfiltered.com. Happy Halloween. Make sure that you go trick-or-treating. Enjoy your night. I am Cole Thompson the Clown. Stay safe and stay spooky. Peace.